What areas should we look at? And today it's actually about perfections.
I cheated.
You cheated?
A little bit before this. 5 seconds before we got on, I Googled.
Why did you give me 95? I'm going to struggle now to keep or maintain that standard. So this is episode 27, I believe. And what I was thinking that we should talk about today is perfection. I know that in the past, when I've been doing bits of artwork and stuff, I thought everything had to be perfect. And if it wasn't, then I'd have to scrub everything and start all over again. One of the other issues is that whenever you're playing music, you sometimes think that you need to play perfect. And when you don't, you stop, and that interferes with the performance. Whereas if you just carried on playing, then maybe the audience wouldn't actually notice. And a lot of writers, when they start writing, they end up editing the piece that they never get beyond the first chapter. And I was just wondering, is that something that you've experienced in your business life with the way that people have run certain projects?
Oh, I'm just, stunned. I'm going, I was thinking, again, what pops into my head is, picture perfect. Or when you're asking about my business life in terms of accounting, you're going, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4. Then that's not a great accountant. 2 and 2 is any number you want it to be if you're the customer and you don't want to pay tax. Or if you need to exaggerate the figures, you need to be creative with your accounting. Perfection is, maths is and music, I think, can be perfect. The note is a note. It's not a dud note. It's a dud note if it's played in the wrong sequence. But the operas out there, the magic of maths and all that, they're seeking perfection. They're seeking the answer. They're not seeking the wrong answer or half an answer or half an orchestra or half like a song. It's what's the perfect song? What's the perfect dance? What's the perfect number?
One of the problems...
the golden number. The perfect number is the golden number.
Well, one of the problems that's been happening with music today, I think, is that everything has been so overmixed, so kind of unrealistic, is that what is seen to be perfect is way beyond what most people can actually sing or play ordinarily. Like they're auto-pitching people's voices and things like that. Now, I recently got some vinyls of the 1967 Casino Royale, and on it there's a Dusty Springfield singing "The Look of Love." And in it, you kind of hear her singing, and there's a little bit of a kind of strange sort of quality to her voice. You kind of go, is that right? And they kind of go, actually, that rawness is actually really nice. It's because you kind of go, actually, other people can do that. We can meet that kind of performance. Whereas with some of the stuff we have,
I'm hearing, yep, wrong is right, right is wrong. Perfect is AI could probably come up with the perfect tune, the perfect rhythm, the perfect balance of the maths that says this should be a hit. And it will never get a hit because it's not, the perfection is not as attractive as, actually that's it, what does a perfect person look like? And I think there was a question on Facebook there only earlier on saying, why are we asymmetrical? In a sense of you can draw a line straight down the middle and we should look the same on either side, a mirror of ourselves. But what's the perfect body? What's the perfect visage? What's the perfect hairdo? I don't think imperfection is the attraction. Perfection is the impossible. And for the percent to get it, then everyone else is imperfect or everything else is imperfect. But I think they're more attractive and perfection should be less attractive.
And I know that with a lot of work that I've done in the past, you see, again, it's very easy to criticize something. And we tend to do this ourselves when we're producing some kind of content. We come up for reasons for why it doesn't work. It's not good enough. It needs to be changed. And before we know it, we've spent longer and longer that it never actually gets out there for somebody else to tell us that actually it was okay. And I think that's the case with me playing in an audience.
Now, I cheated.
You cheated.
A little bit before this. 5 seconds before we got on, I Googled, I goggled, I looked up, because what popped into my head was the 80-20 rule. I think it's the Pareto principle. And what it says is 80% of the effort, or might get you 20% of the reward, or the other way around, 80% of your money comes from 20% of the effort, and the next 80% of the effort is for the last 20%. So if the 100% is perfection, but you only want the 80% if it takes you 20% of the effort, then find the next equivalent of that again and start again. Don't seek the last 20 because it's going to take longer, more effort, more cost, and return less to you.
Well, I know that in the past when I've actually drawn something or painted something, I've always got very particular with and very fine with what I was doing. And I went to see an Irish artist called Janet Pierce. And she said, look, you can film me doing a demonstration. I said, great, And we went in there and started filming. And she's kind of, you just slap it on here and it slap it on there and it goes across there. And it's a bit wet. And right, okay, let's go and hang it up. And I'm kind of going, well, okay, let's go and hang it up. And they says, yeah, 400 quid, that'll get me now.
That's
and
done.
I'm kind of going, my God, that's really brilliant, because that's it. That's all you need to do. Yeah,
that's a little saying. It's leave good enough alone. I think that's a saying, but and it's back to I think I had a little bit of a journey to perfection in my using spreadsheets and things. It's like I was trying to achieve, actually in most of my roles, I was trying to achieve too much. I was trying to answer questions that were not yet asked. I was thinking they might be or they could be, but I didn't really wait to say more than likely they won't be. Therefore, you've gone way and beyond what they're asking for, and they aren't really paying for, don't really want, and they don't see what you're doing. So 80-20 was enough. Just get us over the line, get good enough delivered. We can build upon that later. If need, big thing there, big caveat, if need be, if so deserves, or the cost justifies it, because resources, be it money, time or effort, are limited and are best put and targeted at the thing that gives them most value in the short term. So it might be project 1 is finished, project 2 needs to start, redeploy resources, go back to 80-20, and then do again, rinse, repeat.
Well, I remember as starting out as an editor, you would put a lot of effort into doing an edit, and when the director would come in and start to pull the piece apart, you'd feel kind of deflated because you put so much effort and so much sweat into making sure this was perfect as far as you were concerned. And now he was coming along and making changes. And after a while, you began to realize, look, he's not getting at you personally. It's just that he feels that he's got to have his voice. So you need to actually allow him to have his voice. So what we then started to do in the edit suite, editors as well as me as an assistant and then me eventually as an editor, was we'd actually do it and put in a few little flaws here and there. And when we went to view the whole thing, the director kind of go, right, okay, oh, look, there's a flaw there. Could you fix that bit? And could you fix that bit? And we kind of go, oh, right, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Building in the exaggerated flaws that has a big arrow saying point here, so their eye is drawn to it, so they can give their tuppence halfpenny worth or give their value. Oh, now it's mine. I've taken ownership of the work. I made a difference. My 20% became the 80% of the value because I crossed the I and dotted the T. That's what they're doing. And again, every level of management, in my opinion, does want to have that, one eye over, take ownership. But the strange thing is sometimes take ownership and then forget it came from anywhere in the same sort of sentence. It's, this is now mine going forward. My minions have delivered. I've got this to here. I suppose that's what management roles are. You're responsible for getting your team and your tasks and resource and your budgets aligned that it delivers on a time scale, whatever the goal is. And there it is. Now you're going, I delivered. We delivered, I delivered, but the finger just points at one place from senior management down going, if there's something wrong, they start with you. Now, you immediately have to have it on the back of your tongue, it was George, it was Garvin. Because it's the quick hot potato pass. It was not me. I don't do the work. They didn't. They hid this from me. They showed me this. But no, we can be positive and go, 80-20 will do. Look what I got for your budget. We delivered more than you could have for less. That's the language we want to have. And good enough is alone. Or good enough is good enough. Don't keep on, get it out
Absolutely.
there. That's what he's saying. That's the language of minimum viable product or minimum viable proposition. Let's get to the 80-20 as quick as we can. Let's get the minimum something that we can now build on the value, and we can engage with different people to keep on putting that cream and bell and whistle on top as opposed to arguing over the start point. So get it out there. And this is the journey we're on now. We're in a minimal viable proposition. We don't really know all of it. We're trying to arrive at that nice 80-20. So then we can build in more value and focus the effort.
And I think, again, that's the same with a lot of artists who or writers especially. I've worked on a few publications where we've been developing something for them. And what I began to realize was there was no point in me doing any extra work when they weren't there, because they would assume that they wouldn't even be aware of how long it took to do that particular activity. So you made sure that they were always there and they could see what was going on, and then they'd go off quite happy. But the other problem was also is that if you were working as a film editor and you're working with a director, and the director doesn't seem to have any ideas of what they want to do with all this stuff, and they just say, well, you're an editor, you know what you're doing, you're the expert. And you're going to go, oh no, I'm going to put something together, and he'll come back in later and say, that's not what I wanted. And you're going to go, well, you need to tell me what you wanted in the first place, and then I'm not wasting your time and I'm not wasting my time.
And there's the language of manage expectations. That's come into me in the last few days again. It's unrealistic expectations, expecting 80% from a 20% budget. That's a different story. It's expecting you to deliver it on a fresh air. Or why didn't you do this? Because, well, unless I can clone myself, you can't, something has to give. That's, I have great praise for project managers, because I pity them in their role, because it's a game of give and take. If you want more here, something has to give somewhere else. You can't keep on raising expectations and dropping resource and budget. They have to all match, or one goes up, the other goes down, unless you get more. You want more, give me more. There's no problem taking on more, but we want more resources, we want more budget. If one of these lines is not moving, if you want more here, something has to give there. Reprioritize and let me know what you can do without. But that's the game. That's the ongoing battle in project management speak and business speak. But in real life as well, you can't expect to have the golden goose in the backyard, and like it's not. Things can't keep on giving. You can get 10 lettuces from a cabbage patch, whatever the hell it is. You can't expect to be eating a year out of it. You have to have more, or put in more effort or more resource. So it's perfectionism. I think I don't want to. I think I erred on in certain ways to try and get the perfect spreadsheet. I don't even know what that is, but I mean, or make the numbers work better, or actually tell a different story than what they were telling. Make it easier, make it faster. But it was most of the time the customers and myself, and what I was really doing was not stepping forward and looking to deliver more value that would be recognized for what it is and asked for and valued by the other side. So you need to be this little mini project manager of yourself. You need to step out of your silo. You need to engage with other people, and you need to sort of be seen as the value and not the problem.
And I think one of the great things about going on the journey that we're currently going on is that we realized that we hadn't necessarily got everything in place, but we had enough to get started. It was just a case of, look, go and do it. Take some action, step forward, break through those fears that you may have, and start doing some of these recordings. And before we know it, we're on episode 27 at this particular point in time. And we're becoming quite used to the process. We come in here, we set up, and we start recording, and we have a conversation. We have some pre-production, which we quite often don't think about, but we're processing some ideas of how do we get started? What is it we're going to talk about? What areas should we look at? And today it's actually about perfection. And what we've realized is that we could go off and do loads and loads of research, but quite often, as we said in the universe, things are given to you. And I was reading a chapter in The Artist's Way, and it was actually talking about perfection. And I began to recognize a person that I was a few years ago who was anxious, who was very, as I said earlier on the show, very, very fine in what I was trying to do, and everything had to be perfect. The fear would grip me after I do a painting that I could never do it again. That was the only time I could do it. Oh my God, it had to be perfect. And then you get the same thing with say, writers as they're coming to get a book close to publication. The panic sets in case people don't like it, in case they rubbish them, that their reputation is destroyed. And you're kind of going, that's all prefabricated. You haven't done this yet. So this is your first time. Don't fear.
Most of it's a lot of it's in our own head. Yeah. Actually, the thing is If we put one video, we were probably discussing this earlier on, if you put a video out and it hasn't been seen, but there's a couple of billion people, even if one person saw it and they didn't like it and they got annoyed at it, or it wasn't great and their opinion was such and such, you go, and we put another one out, well, they may not watch it again, but the next person seeing it for the first time has their first opinion. So, and that's where I was talking about my sister's paintings before under the bed. It doesn't matter if they're 30 years old, they're brand new because the first customer hasn't seen it, or even if they're brand new to anyone that hasn't seen it, even if someone else has. That's the weird thing, is we're new to ourselves and going on this journey. There may or may not be an audience out there. There's a billion audiences out there, because every audience is an audience of one, being that person is watching or not, or will watch again, or will say they liked or disliked to someone else. I got a good affirmation there yesterday that my brother-in-law is listening to our podcast, of which we only have 6 out there at the moment, but he's actually listening to the podcast. He drives for an hour and a half to Dublin and he lets them roll in, and he likes them, he enjoys them. And my sister-in-law as well now, they're very close to home, they're giving me the benefit of the doubt, they know it was me that was putting it up there. They may not have found it and come across it in the normal scheme of things, but I don't think anyone's going to listen to 6 hours of this tripe if they did, if because it's me or because it's you. It has to be something in it, and then they find that there is something that they're enjoying. It's the pace. It's fast. It's slow. George is sane, and Garvin could be insane. There's a certain unknown quality or unknown quantity of what might happen next, and that's because we haven't a clue. So we're not working the script. No, the script is one word or within a certain boundary of research, but we're not. We're actually looking for the imperfections. The imperfections, I believe, is the value. The perfection is regurgitation of rule or what someone else said or did. The imperfection is our take on it. It's what's different, what's the unknown factor, what's the extra value, what's that thread, what's that improv, which will bring in an unknown quantity. And I think that's what most of the stars out there have, is there's certain unknown qualities and quantities that person has over the next person, copying them and doing the same process. The process is the rule, the journey, but the difference, I believe, and the value is sometimes the imperfection and the ghost in the machine.
Yeah, it's that little sort of... There used to be a thing in weavers, and occasionally the cloth that they had to weave within would have these so-called imperfections. They would have something in them that was a flaw as far as they were concerned. Then what would happen is that as they were working away at this material, the imperfection became the embellishment of that particular cloth that gave it its character.
The uniqueness
of the whole thing.
Otherwise, it was a reproduced pattern of 100. But the fact it was handmade and a slight imperfection came in now made it a unique piece of art, different from the one that was following the same process. Now, what popped into my head for a second or two there was the imperfections. If you're seeking value in collector's items, be it coinage or notes printed or that type of thing, the imperfection becomes the value on the basis of a billion notes were made, but this one has the face facing the wrong way. That now has the value. It's the difference. It's the broken process is the value in a collectability sort of scenario. It's the record of a limited production. It's the one of a kind. We're seeking out these one of a kinds, which by definition more than likely aren't the perfections.
Well, what you just reminded me of was that when they brought out the new plastic £5 notes, I got one day and looked on it and went, oh, look, there's a picture of Nightingale, the nurse Nightingale. I thought, wow, I wonder if that's on all of these kind of thing. And I thought, oh, well, I went and paid for something. And the next day I'd suddenly discovered that there's 5 of these £5 notes going out in circulation. And if you happen to have one, they're worth like £5,000. And the next thing I heard that somebody else across the country was actually got 5,000. But having said that, I thought, well, at least I saw it. Not that I got the value of it, but I kind of appreciated this slightly changed part of this £5 note.
Now, I'm wondering, again, the language of perfection. I'm sure we should have looked up the definition of perfection is exact. It's 100%. It's 100% right. It's exact. No, a perfect diamond, a perfect song. I don't even know. a perfect something is someone else's measure of definition of what perfect is, and within certain parameters. But I think, only you can be the perfect you. Only I can be the perfect me. So there might be a clone or potential out there, but it will still just be a copy. It's going to be a copy of the perfect one. That's all it's going to be. It can't, if it goes off and has different personalities or God knows what, it then becomes the perfect it, not the perfect you. It's perfect number two. It's the uniqueness is the whole thing. So we don't need to have to be the perfect ourselves. We already are, unless we're washed over with this, I need the perfect abs, the perfect six-pack, the perfect nose, the perfect, posterior and boobs and God knows what. It just, there's no such thing. It's, in my opinion, it's you are you. Play the cards you were dealt in that context. If something is broken and you have to get a bit of plastic surgery to fix it to get back to you, then by all means. The enhanced build that's not you. That's plastic. That's fabrication. That's dress up. That's costume. But that's anxiety. That's depression. That's mental health. I can't even comment on any of the above. That's someone's journey to their own perception of what their perfect self should look like, or versus what it does look like.
I decided to do what you just now said, which was to actually look it up, see what the definitions are. So it's an adjective, okay, and it is having all required or desired elements, qualities and characteristics as good as it can be. That's perfect, absolute, complete. And then the verb is make something completely free from fault or defects, make as good as possible. Now that's
I
perfect.
think there's nearly a machine definition there. The second definition is you're making a widget, and the widget has to fit in the hole.
Everything has to be the same.
And it has to be the same.
Well,
now the first definition was, I think, closer to what we were saying is, you are already perfect. You are the perfect you. No other you could be that perfect, given how all your bits go together and how they work. This is you. Here you roll.
Well, let's look at, because what we were trying to. It wasn't the perfect thing, which we really can't really attain. It was being a perfectionist. And a perfectionist is a person who refuses to accept any standard short of perfection. And the adjective of that is refusing to accept any standard short of perfection. And that's the difficulty, because if you become a perfectionist, you're never ever going to achieve your goal. And
the very definition is unattainable, because there's no such thing as perfection, and the definition of perfection by definition is unattainable.
Well, there's perfectionism in psychology is a personality or character characterized by a person striving for flawlessness and setting high performance standards. Basically, they can never be achieved.
And again, this is back to, that's most of management I used to know. It's expecting, water out of sand. It's the unachievable, the unrealistic, the unattainable. That definition of goals or something was SMART. It's meant to be short, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely or something. I'm not 100% sure of the 5 letters there, but the whole point was they have to be realistic.
Yes,
they have to be achievable. And by that, and you don't need perfection unless you're trying to get a machined part, and even that could actually have imperfections within it, but perfect enough to fit the round hole into the the square plug into the round hole. That's enough. Don't need to be made of gold. It can be made of metal. It can be more perfect. It can be made of diamond. It doesn't change the fact it's a screw going into a screw hole. What constitutes perfection? Now, we're trying to be square plugs and round holes on a journey to perfection. If we're just even trying to be a perfectionist or some way towards it. Now, I know my own son, he just got 10 A's in his inter-cert or junior cert, and, they were 95 and 5 of them. And I go, did you spell your name wrong? Did you lose a lot? You nearly go, I think the marks were nearly taken off him, just to take the marks off him, as opposed to the answer was wrong. If you regurgitate, the rules are 1, 2, 3, the rules are 1, 2, 3, you got them, it's 100%. You don't want that is too much. It's too, because then you have to keep on attaining it. Therefore, to maintain perfection becomes high anxiety, unhealthy, stress building. You cannot maintain that being you.
Well, I remember starting an Open University course, and it was the first time I'd done other courses, but it was the first time I was starting a degree course. And I'd done the first essay and I got 95. And I'm sitting there kind of going, why did you give me 95? I'm going to struggle now to keep or maintain that standard. Normally I was getting like 62s and you kind of go, well, yeah, great. Because at the end of the course, I should get up to at least 80. But 95, I never got another 95. They just went down.
We're on the curve of the law of diminishing returns.
Absolutely.
It's like, based on our age and based on even putting the same effort in, you may not get the same reward. That was the madness of, we're watching these videos on how to get your subscribers up and how to get 1,000 this, that and the other, and we're process people, you apply the process and nothing bloody happens, or you apply the process and go, no, it worked for you because it was 5 years ago and you got that viral something, and now the algorithms have changed 347 times since, and this same effort will not get that reward if applied again in the same process. So a new variability, a new difference is required, an extra effort to get to the same point is required. The 80-20 rule is on its own journey of this law of diminishing returns for achieving the same end with the same amount of effort and resource does not guarantee success.
Now, there's something very interesting about that concept, because basically we were talking about perfectionism, and perfectionism is basically where someone doesn't accept that it's not perfect, and they keep on working at it, and they could spend all their life. I worked on a documentary that took quite a few years, and I got quite frustrated because we went through at least 13 or 14 iterations of that one. I was kind of going, but the first one was good enough. Why do we keep changing it? Why can't they accept that this is okay? And they wanted to hit perfection. And in the end, the film never went anywhere. It just stayed on the hard drive. It still is on the hard drive.
No,
and that's very frustrating.
Perfection, you use a lot of words there where it's going, they. And the they might be one decision maker that holds the sway, that he himself or she himself is or herself is a little bit of a perfectionist. But they don't know what success looks like. They don't know what they're critiquing and they're finding fault, yet they don't know what the measure of success is or what the measure of perfection looks like, and will not recognize it when they see it. And and you can never attain it. So it was on this journey to, it'll never be good enough for this individual.
That's right.
The thing itself was already 80-20 built and there, and that whole other 13 iterations didn't even deliver 80% of the next 20%.
No, the thing is,
with all this extra effort, you could have done the film 3-4 times over, or the documentary.
Well, that's the point I was about to make, because the same time period while I was working for the BBC, we worked on nearly 50 half-hour documentaries. So, 25 hours worth of material that went out into the world to be criticized or whatever, but we kept knocking it out, and we were doing it, and then we learnt our craft, we developed, we matured, we got better. But to stick with one project that lasts so long it is actually quite frustrating. And I think that's where, what I'm enjoying about the processes that we're currently going through is that we are working on things. Yes, they have their flaws, but they don't ruin the whole process. They don't ruin the enjoyment of actually listening to these programs. They actually entertain, and next time we'll get better because we're discovering new ways of processing this material, and we're developing our craft. And as we go on in the years to come, we'll actually we may still find that we're doing exactly the same kind of stuff, because that is what is required. I know that when I was at the college, I was going through a marking process, and I actually wondered whether my standards had dropped. So I took a load of assignments that I'd marked in the current year at that point, and I looked back at what I'd done about 10 years before. And to my surprise, I had the same standards. I was still working the same way.
There's a language. We're saying the process is the process.
Yeah.
The content and the value are within that machine. We can package shite all day long, And it has to get into be a video, it has to have sound, it has to be put up and loaded, cut and pasted and put up there. And then the first customer or audience member goes, that was shite. No, the work and effort, nothing to do with anything. All they see is the end result of, was that comment, was that joke, was that fact, was it interesting, was it not, was it my perfection, was it theirs?
Well, at the same point is that you could spend 100 hours on something that people don't appreciate. Where a load of people think it's absolutely fantastic, it's brilliant, it's beautiful, but it dies a death. And then you could just go and knock something out off the cusp very, very rapidly, and it suddenly gets millions of views.
Well, that's exactly what we did yesterday. We said, for a laugh, we'll knock. Well, you did it. I say we, the royal we. George will do all the work. I will do the critiquing of, can you make the lips bigger and the eyes blue? And that's what it was. You knocked up an anime of the two of us, and we put it up there on LinkedIn, and it got 200 views in a matter of hours. Where we just put a video up, 6 hours before that, and it still hasn't got quarter of that, because the algorithm is deciding that people won't want to see it, or it's not going to proffer it. Then it puts forward an image because it sees it differently as a different piece of or material which may be of interest. The people then like or don't like, and the effort and value that was in it was a lot quicker on the time, but the value it was extracting was, people are saying, I like that. It's that engagement of, I like that. You look like Mick Jagger, or this, or who do you think you are? And you're looking a bit of a suntan going on there. But the strange thing is, that's the very thing they're not even talking about a podcast or vlogcast. They're talking about the colour of the eyes on an anime of something we're trying to get to the broadcast. So it's not up to you, the production machine. It's up to the audience to where they put their value and what their measure of may not be perfection, but a journey to their perfection is whether I will look at it or not, whether I'll entertain it or not, or whether it meets my minimum criteria of, it warrants me investing some of my time to have an opinion, to look or give or listen to or otherwise. We have to align production with the audiences out there, and the audience means the person sitting in the pub or the neighbour or the shop worker or anyone else. You're just a body, that you're in your universe, they're in theirs, and you're trying to cross universes here, and perfection can get in the way, or it can act as a block, or it can prevent you even starting.
Now, what's interesting, I watched a YouTube video on the iPhone recently about the designing of the iPhone. And of course, it's one of those icon items that everybody thinks is perfect. It's absolutely brilliant. But on the day that they actually launched it, there were like 5 or 6 different departments that had never seen how it was going to look. They worked on one bit, another bit. Apparently, the software was likely to actually break down halfway through the first presentation. So they were all sitting there praying like mad that nothing went wrong. So even then, the object that was shown that looked as though it was amazing, it's brilliant, it's beautiful, it's perfect, all the people behind knew that it wasn't quite doing what they hoped it would do, but it eventually did. And that's because they went on that 20/80 rule that you've talked about. And I think that is a great way of applying life, because you suddenly start to take the pressure off yourself, because you're no longer trying to hit that perfectionism that you feel that you should have. But I think if you're being professional, then you realize when the cutoff point comes.
There you go. The 80 is where the value is delivered, or in a sense of that's how far you can go. And 80% is as good as perfection is going to get. Because if you get 80%, you've already got it. The other 20% is not worth the extra effort for the amount of investment of time, resource, and energy. Therefore, move on to the next project, move on to the next thing.
And here we are at the end of another show. We've suddenly realized we've got to cut it off just about here, and that's the perfect end, I think. What do you think, Garvin?
I have no idea what the question was until he told me.
Just say perfect.
Perfect.
Do what it says on the tin. Follow and share.